It's called, "My Parents Just Celebrated My Sister's Promotion, so I invited them to my company's IPO dinner. You won't believe what happened at the most awkward dinner of my life." Picture the scene. My parents, who always treated me like the invisible daughter, sitting at a $1 million table, finding out for the first time that the daughter they ignored for years had just become a multimillionaire. But let me start from the beginning, because this story needs to be told properly. My name is Sarah. I'm 32 years old, and I've lived in San Francisco for the past decade. I grew up in a typical middle-class family in Ohio. My father, Robert, is an accountant, and my mother, Linda, works as a nurse. We've always been a close family. Or so I thought, until I realized that close meant united around my little sister. Jessica has always been the darling of the family. 2 years younger than me, she had everything I seemingly lacked. She was outgoing, popular in school, captain of the cheerleading team, and later graduated from a prestigious university with a law degree. I, on the other hand, had always been the nerd in the family, the one who spent hours on the computer, who preferred books to parties, who studied computer science at a state university that no one knew about. Throughout my childhood and adolescence, I felt like I was competing for attention in a race with only one prize, and that prize always went to Jessica. When she got a good grade, it was a celebration. When I got a good grade, it was expected. When she graduated from high school, my parents threw a huge party. When I graduated, we went to Applebee's for dinner. The pattern repeated itself through college, at my first job, at every milestone in my life. But the one that really stuck with me happened 3 months ago. Jessica had just been promoted to junior partner at the law firm where she works in Chicago. Don't get me wrong, it's a big accomplishment, and I was genuinely happy for her. The problem was my parents' reaction. They threw a celebratory dinner at the best restaurant in town, invited all their relatives, gave emotional speeches about how proud they were, posted photos on Facebook with captions like, "Our favorite lawyer," and "So proud of our Jessica." It was an Oscar-worthy production. Meanwhile, I was in San Francisco, working 16-hour days at a fintech startup I had co-founded 3 years earlier. We were in the final stages of preparing for our initial public offering, IPO. It was the culmination of years of insane work, sleepless nights, and risky investments that could have left me in debt forever. The irony was palpable. While my parents celebrated Jessica's promotion as if she had discovered the cure for cancer, I was about to become a multimillionaire, and they had no idea. It wasn't for lack of trying on my part. Over the years, whenever I talked about my work, the company, the progress we were making, I would get responses like, "That's great, honey," followed immediately by, "Speaking of Jessica, did you hear that she—" It was like my professional life was an interesting hobby, but not something worthy of any real attention. The final straw was when I called to tell her that we had closed our latest round of funding, raising $50 million. My mom interrupted me mid-sentence to talk about how Jessica had won a big case. In that moment, something inside me broke and built itself back up, stronger. That's when the idea came to me. Our company, Fintech Solutions, had scheduled its IPO for a Thursday in October. The event would be celebrated with an exclusive dinner at the Four Seasons in San Francisco, just for investors, board members, founders, and close family. Each seat at that dinner cost more than my dad made in 6 months. 3 weeks before the IPO, I called my parents. "Hi, Mom, how are you?" "Sarah, what a surprise. How are you, honey?" "I'm fine. Listen, would you be free on Thursday the 24th? I wanted to invite you to dinner." I heard my mom check her calendar. "I think so. Is it something special?" "It's a work dinner, kind of important." "That's great. Of course we'll go. Your dad will be happy to get out of the house." That was it. It was done. They had accepted the invitation without asking a single question about the details. If Jessica had invited them, I'm sure there would have been a full investigation into the event. The reason, who else would be there, what to wear. The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind. Our IPO was one of the most anticipated of the year in the fintech space. The specialized media was covering our every move. I was doing interviews with Forbes, TechCrunch, The Wall Street Journal. My picture appeared on the cover of Entrepreneur magazine as one of the 30 under 30 changing the world of finance. And my parents? Not a word. Not a single, "I saw you in the magazine," or "Your company is in the news." Nothing. On the morning of the IPO, I woke up at 5 a.m. Not because I was nervous, well, not just nervous, but because I had an exercise routine that helped me stay sane during stressful times. I ran along the bay, watching the sunrise over San Francisco, thinking about how my life was about to change completely. By 9:30 a.m., I was on the New York Stock Exchange via video conference, along with my partner Mark, watching our stock trade for the first time. The opening price was $32 per share. Within 2 hours, it was 48. By the end of the day, it closed at 52. Within hours, my 15% stake in the company had officially made me a multimillionaire. On paper, I was worth about $78 million. But the most surreal part of the day was yet to come. At 6 p.m., I got ready for dinner. I chose an elegant black Armani dress, Louboutin shoes, and the pearl necklace my grandmother had left me. I wanted to look impeccable, not out of vanity, but because I knew this would be a historic evening for so many reasons. I arrived at the Four Seasons at 7 a.m. The room was stunning. White linen tables, floral arrangements that cost more than a used car, waiters circulating with Dom Perignon champagne. It was the kind of event you see in movies about Wall Street. My parents arrived promptly at 7:30, and I almost laughed at the looks of shock on their faces. They clearly hadn't expected anything like this. My father was wearing the suit he'd bought for my cousin's wedding 5 years ago, and my mother was wearing what she considered a fancy dress, which she'd actually bought at an outlet mall. "Sarah, my God," my mother whispered when she saw me. "What is all this?" "This is the dinner I mentioned, remember?" They looked around like lost tourists. I led them to our table, which was right at the front, near the stage, where the speeches would be given. "Honey," my father said, still processing the surroundings, "are you sure we're in the right place? This looks really expensive." "You're exactly where you're supposed to be." During the cocktail hour, I introduced my parents to a few guests. "These are my parents, Robert and Linda. Mom, Dad, this is David Peterson, our CEO, and this is Amanda Richardson from Goldman Sachs, who managed our IPO." I could see the confusion growing in their eyes with each introduction. CEO? Goldman Sachs? IPO? When we sat down for dinner, my mother finally asked, "Sarah, can you explain to me what's going on? Who are all these people?" "They're investors, board members, executives, people who are important in the financial world. But why are we here?" Before I could respond, David stood up to give the first speech of the evening. "Good evening, everyone. Today is a historic day for FinTech Solutions. After 3 years of hard work, innovation, and determination, we have officially become a public company." Applause echoed around the room. I glanced sideways at my parents, who were politely clapping, still not fully understanding where they were. David continued, "None of this would be possible without our incredible founding team. I want to give a special toast to Sarah Mitchell, our Chief Technology Officer and co-founder, whose revolutionary vision made all of this possible." The entire room turned to me, applauding. I stood up, waved, and smiled, all the while noticing my parents' faces getting progressively paler. "Mom," I whispered as I sat down, "FinTech Solutions is my company. I founded it." Total silence from them. The speeches continued. Amanda from Goldman Sachs spoke about the success. Mark, my partner, gave a moving speech about our journey from our first day in a garage to this moment. And then it was my turn. When I stood up to speak, the room was completely silent. I looked around the audience, billionaire investors, Wall Street executives, financial media journalists. And then my eyes found my parents. 3 years ago, I began. I had an idea that many people thought was crazy. I wanted to democratize access to sophisticated financial investments by using artificial intelligence to create personalized portfolios for everyday people. Today, our platform manages over $2 billion in assets for 500,000 clients. I paused, letting the numbers sink in. But this journey has not been easy. There were times when I worked 20-hour days, slept in the office, lived on ramen for weeks. There were times when I questioned whether it was worth it to continue. I looked directly at my parents. Over the years, I've learned that sometimes the people who should be supporting you unconditionally are the ones who believe in you the least. And I've learned that that's not necessarily a bad thing, because when you're proven right, when you achieve something that no one thought you could, the feeling is indescribable. The applause was deafening. People stood up. A few investors I deeply respected came up to congratulate me personally. When I returned to the table, my parents were in complete shock. "Sarah," my mother said, her voice shaking, You're a multi-millionaire?" "Technically, yes." My father ran his hand through his hair, a nervous tic he'd had since I was a child. "And you never told us?" "I tried to tell you, several times. You always changed the subject to talk about Jessica." Awkward silence. "Honey," my mother tried, "we didn't know." "I know you didn't know, because you never asked. In 3 years, you never asked me any details about my work, about my company, about what I was building." The rest of the dinner was a mix of discomfort and revelation. My parents learned that I had been on the cover of magazines, that I was considered one of the most promising young entrepreneurs in the country, that I had given lectures at prestigious universities, that my company was revolutionizing an entire industry. All of this information was publicly available. All it took was a simple Google search. When the event was over, I offered them a ride back to the hotel. The ride was silent until my mother finally spoke. "Sarah, we made a terrible mistake." "It wasn't a mistake, Mom. It was a choice. You chose to pay attention to only one daughter. We didn't get it. You didn't get it, because you didn't want to get it. Jessica has always been easier for you to understand. Law is a profession you understand. Technology, startups, that always seem too complicated or irrelevant." My dad finally spoke. "How can we fix this?" The question caught me off guard. I had planned this evening as a kind of revenge, a way to show them what they had lost. But hearing the sincerity in his voice, I realized that maybe there was room for more than the satisfaction of being right. "I don't know if it can be fixed," I answered honestly. "But maybe we can start over. Really try this time." Over the next few months, our relationship changed dramatically. My parents began asking real questions about my work, taking a genuine interest in my projects. My mom even set up a Google alert with my name so she wouldn't miss any news about the company. Jessica, oddly enough, reacted surprisingly maturely when she heard the whole story. She called me a week after dinner. "Sarah, I always knew you were brilliant, and I always felt guilty about being your parents' favorite. I didn't ask to be, but I knew I was." "Jess, it's not your fault." "Maybe it's not, but I still feel bad. I'm proud of you. I always have been." That conversation with Jessica was, in many ways, more important to me than the fortune I made from the IPO. Today, 6 months later, my life is completely different. Financially, of course, but especially in terms of family. My parents come to visit me regularly in San Francisco. They've met my team, visited our office, and attended one of my talks. And Jessica? She's considering a career change to corporate law, specializing in technology startups. She says I've inspired her. The lesson I've learned from all of this is that sometimes we need to stop waiting for other people to recognize our worth and start building a life that is validation enough in itself. Recognition from others is a bonus, not a necessity. That dinner at the Four Seasons was, without a doubt, one of the most satisfying moments of my life. Not because I humiliated my parents, but because they finally saw the real me. And I discovered that deep down, this was what I always wanted: to be seen, to be recognized, to be valued for the person I really am. Revenge may be sweet, but reconciliation is even sweeter. If you like this video, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. Leave your opinion in the comments. I'll stop here and see you next time.